This is the BEnergyAware podcast. Hi, and welcome to the BEnergyAware podcast. I'm your host, Bran Katanec. Let's keep in touch on Instagram at BEnergyAware or through our website, BEnergyAware.com. If you like this podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much. So, what is this podcast about? Well, this podcast is about empowerment and about getting empowered. No matter your age, your background, circumstances, or your personality traits, being empowered is something achievable by just about anyone, and it's something that's much needed in the world today. There is a new way to approach personal growth, and that would be through being aware of energy. And what do I mean when I say being aware of energy? This is something I already covered in some of the previous episodes. If you're tuning in for the first time, I'm just going to mention a few things. There's the energy of our thoughts and the energy of our emotions. And there's also the energy of our environment. We need to be aware of what energy we bring and what kind of energy surrounds us. And then we need to know how to best deal with both. But not only that, we also need to know how to use all that to heal ourselves. Why? So that we can function at our optimum and live the best life possible. That's why in this podcast, we talk about meditation, self-healing, creativity, and expression, all of which deepen our awareness and bring about a profound healing. If you're new to this podcast, please go back and have a listen to the episodes where I talk a bit more about energy. And as usual, there will be more talk about energy in the future. My guest today is Susan Jane. Susan and I talk about how to hear the voice of your intuition and about practicing using intuition daily. Susan also shares about her life and about events that led her to discover and listen to the voice of her intuition.
My name is Susan Jane, and I've been called the intuitist, which is like the mentalist, and the mentalist does all the thinking side of things and our thoughts, but the intuitist does more about our feelings and how we handle and deal with that. And I don't know whether I agree with being called that name or putting a label on anything, but the funny thing is it is a lot to do with our feelings, and intuition and developing it and trusting it is so really important. There has been a few life situations that I've had that I've actually relied on my intuition to get me through, and I didn't know it at the time. And it's only as you start to get an understanding of the different information and what's going on that you get those little aha moments that come through. So I am more than happy to jump in and talk about intuition. That's my forte.
Yes, I'm glad to hear that. Well, you mentioned it needs to be nurtured and practice, did you say, or did you use another word?
I tend to use the word practice. I have to be honest. Practice is pretty good in that context. And one of the ways you can practice is using the tools that we have. And we all have different types of tools that we use. And there's tools that people will resonate with. Some of them some can be meditation. That's a tool that we can use to receive the information that we want, or the intuitive information. We can use cards, decks of cards. We could use oracle cards, tarot cards, different areas like that. And what we're doing when we're using those particular tools is we're letting our analytical mind jump in and have a look at the images and what it means, but then allowing those intuitive messages to come through. And the intuitive messages come through from our spirit. I guess, Bram, what I need to sort of explain is what I call intuition, what I class intuition as. Because it's really, really simple and basic, and yet it's so deep and meaningful, because we have two bodies. We have a spiritual aspect of ourself, a spiritual body of ourself, and we have the physical body that everybody sees. Now, intuition for me is the communication between the spiritual body and the physical body. Now, I know that sounds really, really basic, and it's a bit of a, oh yeah, duh, really. But the crazy thing is how we receive those messages and the way that we receive those messages, and everybody's different. And it's a bit like a learning. When we're learning, we need to sometimes see it. We need to sometimes feel it or do it ourselves or practice it ourselves. Sometimes we need to hear it. Sometimes we need the different aspects of learning to get that understanding. And these intuitive messages come through in the same sort of manner. Sometimes we see them, sometimes we hear them, sometimes we feel them. And there's different ways that they all come through. Trusting them is the next big step. That can be hard.
Yes, I really understand when you say trusting. It takes a while of, it takes a little while, quite a bit of practicing to actually start trusting. And then also, when we start trusting, do you think, the decisions that we make as a result of trusting that intuition, do they make a difference? How do they influence, us trusting more or less?
Look, I have to turn around and say it's going to, cut to the short and say it's going to allow you to trust more, because the more you get used to these particular messages that you're receiving and the information you're receiving, the more you learn to go with the flow, the more you learn to trust it. Now, I guess the other aspect is I can go deep down into some of my stories of my growing up. And one of the big things that I was very, very aware of probably 15 years after it happened, but I became very aware of it. And that is the concepts of the two bodies. Now, I was 19 at the time, and I was 2 states away from home on a holiday. And what happened was my spirit left my physical body and watched what was going on. And this was during a very violent pack rape. And I remember during the attack saying, I can't stop these people doing it to me, but can I stop them doing it to anyone else? And in an instant, I left my body. Now, it was really strange sort of situation, because when I talk about it, I refer to my physical body as her or she, because it didn't feel like me. I was outside of the car watching the incident happening and taking place. And we talk about energy, and you've talked about energy before. And I could see the energy radiating from the side of her face. And it's like the heat going off the road. When you see that heat sort of moving off the road, you see it as an energy. I could see that energy coming off the side of her face where she'd been punched in the face, where she was knocked out. You could see the blood coming down from her cheek, from her lip, but you couldn't taste it. And I couldn't feel it. When you're separated from your body, there's no emotional attachment. There's none of the 5 physical senses attached. So the physical body and the spiritual body are very, very different, even though I could see what was happening in that terminology, because I don't know how else to explain it. I couldn't feel it. I couldn't smell the breath and the cigarettes and the alcohol that I could smell before. And while I was away out of the body, out of the physical body, is when I got the messages of what to do and how to cope with it, how to get through this. Now, in an instant, I was back in my body, and I can assure you, all the feelings that I saw, the blood coming out of the back of her head where she was pulled into the car by her hair, and all this sort of thing, all those areas that I could see in inverted brackets, because it wasn't seeing, it was knowing. All those things I could see then or know then, I came back to me in one big foul swoop. And I can assure you, the pain, everything, the taste, the smell, the whole concept came right back in one big hit. And all of a sudden, I'm back in my body. Now, it's then that I could have chosen to not listen to that information that I was given and just continue on however I could. And I have to be honest, I didn't think I was going to survive this. I really didn't think I was going to survive this. So in some weird and strange way, my attitude was, well, I'm not going to survive, but I could help somebody else. And it was then, and I'm not a religious person. I don't follow any religion or anything else. But when I was in primary school, I went to, Sunday school. And I remember only 2 prayers. And funnily enough, I could recite most of it. But the only thing I could really remember was, and what I was told to do was to pray. And it was, forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. Now, when we pray and when this is happening and you've got people attacking you, it's really strange, but I had to do it out loud. And every time I said it, I had to say it louder. Now, I didn't get this information saying, no, you've got to do this and you've got to say it louder. And it certainly wasn't a booming voice saying, you've got to do this and you've got to say it louder. It was just that knowing, that understanding that this is what I needed to do. But of course, as I'm doing that, they were not liking it. And so consequently, the violence escalated to stop me talking, to stop me speaking. And it wasn't until the hands went around the throat and around the mouth and nose and I basically couldn't breathe. And that's what stopped me. I passed out and that was sort of what stopped me. But I honestly believe, and I have no proof, but I honestly believe that 2 of those 3 people that did that no longer did it, and they have to live with that guilt. The 3rd one, I believe, continued because he was the most violent. But what I'm saying here is there's no way known. If somebody said to me that you are going to be attacked like that, and you're going to pray out loud to the attackers for their forgiveness, I would have said, well, I can't say it on your podcast because it's swear words, but there's no way known I would have thought that would have happened. So I had to follow this feeling, this understanding, this knowing to the best of my ability. Now, 12 months after that, I left my body again in a near-death experience. It happened again, like I said, about 10, 15 years later, because I did it deliberately, because I wanted to test the theory. Now, I had read lots and lots of books. I had got an understanding that there's this thing called astral travel, where we can actually leave our physical body. I wanted to give it a go because I had never ever spoken about what had happened to me during that attack or the near-death experience, because I did not know what they were until I read this book. And that's when I went, well, if this is true, I need to prove it to myself. And it took probably 3 or 4 months. And this particular night, I've gone to bed and I've done a little ritual sort of, okay, I want to astral travel and I want to travel to here and I want to see what this looks like. And I'd, psych myself up and I'd go to bed. Well, this particular night, went to bed and all of a sudden I'm flying over our driveway. I knew I was astral traveling. Don't tell me how, I don't know how, but I knew I was doing it. It was so different and yet so similar to what I've done before. And because I knew it, I just got so excited. And of course, emotions bring you back straight to the body. So as soon as I've got excited, it's straight back into the body. And here I am. So that's how I know we do actually have the spirit body and the physical body. And that's when I went, well, okay, I'd been doing a lot of reading. I've been doing a lot of research by then. I was going through an emotional, abusive relationship. I was trying to get an understanding of who I was. And that's when I went, well, if there's a physical body and that has the 5 physical senses, and we have a spiritual body and that has this knowing and understanding, but how do they talk to each other? How do they connect? What is it? And that's when I started to put the analytical with the spiritual, because it had to make sense for me. It's got to make sense. If it didn't make sense, I couldn't get it. And because of these things happening to me, that didn't make sense until I read about them and experienced somebody else or know somebody else that it was experiencing, it started to make sense. And this is why I call the intuition is those messages, that information that we're getting from the spirit to the physical. And that's how I can say that's what it is. I know that's what it is. But then how we receive those messages, and we've talked about this before, Bran, how we receive those messages, we can receive those through our chakras. That's one of the ways we can receive these messages. But yeah, sorry, that was a lot to take on board. I do apologize for that.
No, thank you for this, Susan, because it does, it does paint a good picture of what this could be, and you've actually, I'm glad you shared what you shared, because it does give us a good idea what this is. And then moving on to, merging the two, and how do we know and how do we use intuition in the moment at our will without anything necessarily happening to us. Not necessarily astral traveling, but having that knowing that we just need to do this or that. So how does that happen? Does this take more practice?
Well, it does take practice in the fact that one of the ways to practice is with meditation and receiving that information. I guess the difference with me is that I'm a bit of a theory tester. So if I'm going to believe something, I have to be able to prove it to myself. It doesn't have to be proven to anyone else, but I've got to prove it to myself. So when you're reading books and when you're listening to podcasts, when you're taking on other people's understandings and information, make sure it resonates with you first. If it doesn't resonate with you, if what I've said doesn't resonate with you, that's fine. You'll find something else that does, and that's what you can believe and that's what you can follow. So that's your first aspect of knowing whether you're connecting with your intuition and developing your intuition or whether it's something else. It has to resonate with you. And if it resonates, then you're going to feel better about it. You're going to be able to follow it better. You're going to be able to get an understanding of it. Now, when you're receiving intuitive messages, you can receive them as there's lots of different ways we can receive them. We can receive them first as a feeling, as like an emotion. Sometimes when you wake up in the morning, you might be feeling a little bit blue, a little bit down, a little bit angry for whatever reason. You may have been receiving intuitive messages during your sleep. You may be receiving them as visions. So you just get these images or these pictures. When we're doing clairvoyant readings or psychic readings, we're receiving messages in different ways there. Sometimes that's a feeling, sometimes that's a vision, a thought. So we're getting them on all different ways. Vision also can be like, for some reason, you might look at the clock and you see 11:11. Or you see 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 12:34. You'll see these numbers. They're all signs, they're all visions. Now, we don't sit there for 24 hours watching a clock so we can get 11:11. For some reason, we are drawn to look and it's gone, oh, look at that, it's 11:11. Or look at that, it's 12:34. I get 12:34 all the time. And there's all those meanings behind it. There's another aspect that I explained too. Like, I was driving with my partner a little while back, and we'd been discussing something. I can't quite remember what it was, but he saw a billboard sign go past and he goes, "Did you see that?" And I went, "No, I didn't see it." And he said, "Oh, it was what we were talking about." And then a little bit further on down the track, I said, "Oh, did you hear that?" And it was on the radio. And he goes, "No, I didn't hear it." He goes, "Oh," I said, "Oh, that's what we were talking about too." And so we had a discussion around that. Now, his intuition, for some reason, his spirit said, "Look that way." He saw the billboard. I was listening and heard it on the radio, or heard something on the radio. So it's how we're taking on those intuitive messages. I know when I used to get very, very blotchy hands, so a very physical sign, a bit like goosebumps and things like that. It's all physical signs. My hands would go really blotchy, and this was over about a period of nearly 2 years. And I remember somebody saying to me, "You really should go and get that checked. There could be a liver problem, or it could be this, or it could be that." Eventually I worked it out. When my hands went blotchy and I noticed them going blotchy, there was always somebody around me that needed a healing, because I used to do a lot of healings, sort of like Reiki style healings. And I would work through the palm of my hands. And I was used, because we have chakra centers there too. So I would use those as an energy exchange. And that's why they would always go blotchy. So we have all these little signs that until we pay attention to those little signs, those little awarenesses, we aren't going to connect. And one of the first things I say to people in the awareness is acknowledge everything you see or do or hear or become aware of. Things like, you might be standing there at the bus shelter or something, waiting for a bus, and you hear people talking beside you, and you hear something and you sort of go, well, why did I need to hear that? Become aware of it. It may not mean anything, but why did I need to hear that? Just become aware of it. And these are all these little signs that you're starting to become aware of. Why did I see 1111? What does 1111 mean? Look up angel numbers for 1111, whatever it is. Look up numerology for 1111. See what it means. See what resonates with you. And then you'd be walking down the street or driving down the road and you see a billboard. Why did I see that billboard? What was it? And majority of times it might not mean anything. But every now and again, what you're doing is you're tuning in to what your intuition or your spirit is trying to tell you, or a direction to look, something to listen out for, to hear, something to see. It is trying to get your awareness to certain things. So it's like testing you. If for want of another word, it's like testing you and sort of going, okay, look this way or look at that way. So every time you do, even if you think you're doing it, you're going, okay, I'm going to look this way. Oh, I know I said that. But just be aware of it. There could be something there that means something.
What I want to say is, just to respond to what you just said, is that's probably why people, when they anyone who's new to meditation, when they start to meditate, they start paying more attention. It's a nice feeling to know that there will always be a sign for us, something to follow, something we can learn from, or something to direct us in a certain direction. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the other thing I look at too, Bran, is when people talk about life purpose, we often hear that bantered around a lot. Life purpose. This is my life purpose. And one thing I just want to make very, very clear, your physical body doesn't have the life purpose as your spirit body does. Your spirit body has come into this physical to achieve the life purpose. It's the physical that's actually going to help them get there. So they're both as important as each other. And I know that there's a lot of people that in the spiritual realm that feel that, spirituality is more important than the physicality. No. The spirit can't touch, taste. It doesn't have those five senses. It has to come in to a physical body to get those senses. So the physical body is just as important. But as far as life purpose goes, the life purpose of the physical body is to help the spirit body achieve its life purpose, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Susan. Yes, absolutely. Let's talk about a little bit about life purpose and intuition. Could it be, for some, let's say, young people, someone who's very young, and they want to know what their life purpose is? How do you think intuition can help them?
Well, I agree with what you were saying before about the meditation. I really do feel it's, especially in this day and age, with everything going on and all the information that we have access to, sometimes we have to stop. And I think meditation, I feel, or I know meditation is the best way to do that. And if you can give yourself that time and that space, then you will have the ability to receive those intuitive messages. Once you become stronger at it, now I did meditation every day for quite a number of years, and you do become stronger at it and you do become better at it. And as you said, that's your practice as well. When you start, how can I explain? As you get used to doing the meditation, you get used to hearing the messages come through. Now, if you think about it and you think about, say, hearing your mum's voice or hearing your dad's voice or hearing your friend's voice, you know their voices are different. And that's what it's like when you're doing the meditation. If you hear the voices, you know, and when I say hear the voices, you don't necessarily actually hear, as in the physical sense here. It's probably more of a knowing the voices. So I can say to you now, do you know what your dad sounds like? Or do you know what your mum sounds like? And if you can, remember their voice or some of the funny sayings they may have had or the way they said things. My partner's mum would always say, darling. And she'd say darling with this particular accent, So you knew that was her. So when you're receiving these messages, you will often receive messages like that. And that's how a psychic can tell what, if it's male, female, they basically know the voice, and they can turn around and add that voice and the terminology they're using and the way they're using it. They get all the feeling and everything that goes with it, so they can relay that to the person. You're going to do the same when you start to sit there as a younger person and give yourself that time and space to do it. And the best way I found, now again, each to their own, but the best way I found was to give myself an allocated time of the day and an allocated space, okay, where I had my space. Now, for me, when I first started doing it, at that stage, I had kids were going to school. They were going to school on a bus. I was on a 90-acre organic crop farm. We owned a farm. I knew in the afternoon we'd come in from the farm because we'd start early. We'd come in from that farm. We'd have our shower, basically get dinner ready, wait for the kids to come home from school. That was my space. That was my time. And I thought about 3:30 it was, because the kids were due home about 4. They would head up the hill. You could hear them. But about 3:30, I knew I'd give myself sort of half an hour. And it started off with just 10 minutes because that's all I could do to start with. But I would just give myself that time. And so for that half an hour, whether I was meditating or not, I was in my space, and I had my cushion on the floor, back up against the wall, and that was my space. And the funny thing is, when you create those sort of spaces and that time and that regularity, as soon as you get there, you start straight away to relax and to start to go into that meditative state. And it might take a couple of weeks to get there, but then you start to get into that space as soon as you start to think about it. And then you get into that space as soon as you start to get up in the morning and you go, oh, this afternoon I'm going to do a meditation. I might do a candle meditation. And you start to get into that space quicker, easier, and more regularly, rather than just that half an hour a day. It becomes longer and longer and longer because you're getting into that wavelength. And you can't help it. You just do.
Until you fully live in meditation. I've talked about this on my podcast, and it may be a far-fetched concept these days, but it won't be in the future, because yeah, it's just a natural thing to do, and I feel that the world is going in that direction.
Yes, and that's been talked about a lot too. It will do. It's almost like everything's so busy and busy and busy at the moment with, your mobile phones and the internet and everything going on, that if we don't learn to cut ourselves away from that just for that period of time every now and again, even if it is every day for half an hour, if we don't start to separate ourselves from that, we're just going to get so engulfed in it. You'll never connect with your intuition. You'll never connect with your peace. You'll never connect until you're ready to let go of that external connection.
What does your normal day look like in terms of meditating and listening to those messages?
For me, my general day, for me, is I get up in the morning. I'm a bit of an early riser, and I love to walk in the morning. So I will do like a 45-minute walk every morning. So that's the first thing I do. get up, get out of bed, throw on my, walking clothes. It's not a big, heavy exercise walk. But it's a good pace. It's good. I enjoy it. Get out there with nature, watch the kangaroos, watch the wallabies, all that sort of stuff. The kookaburras going crazy. So you're just immersing in early morning nature, which is really lovely. Now, there is different types of meditation too. So the first type of meditation, which is really, really important, is that passive meditation where you are just sitting down and you're taking it easy. But we can do active meditation as well. And I find that I do a lot of active meditation when I'm walking. So I walk with my partner in the mornings and he does it like a 30-minute circuit. I do an extra 10 minutes and that just gives me my little bit of space. If I've got an interview I want to talk about, if I've got the day ahead of me, I tend to sort of go, this is what I tend to not go, this is what I want to do. I tend to go, this is what I'd like to get done today, but tell me what I need to know. And all of a sudden you start to get this information coming to me. One of the biggest things I do say to people when they are connecting with their intuition, connecting with their intuition, is the first thing to do is ask. When I was being attacked, the first thing I did was ask, how can I stop this? Because I knew I couldn't stop it for me, but how can I stop this? Prayer is like asking. When we go to bed and you sort of go, oh, what am I going to do tomorrow? Or, I've got this problem. How can I get through this problem? You say it when you go to bed and you may get the dreams and the visions and the information that you want. And so my walk in the morning gives me the opportunity to receive the information if I've asked any questions. But I have to be totally honest here. I get more information when I'm having my morning shower than any other time. And apparently running water will do that. So if you are sitting on the toilet and you've got water there, that will also help you receive some intuitive information. So the toilet's a good spot. Don't take your phone. The shower is a great spot too. You will receive intuitive messages. And this is all this, what I call this active meditation, because you're engaging your brain, that physical side, to do something. You're washing the dishes, you're hanging up the washing, you're having a shower, and it allows the spiritual body to say its bit, to give you those intuitive messages. So that's sort of how my day starts. I'm a digital marketer as well. So I'm in front of this computer, I can assure you, a lot of the times, if I'm not doing interviews, if I'm not interviewing for my podcast, or setting up digital marketing displays and all the rest of it, I then do try to get out into nature. That's my space.
How do you see yourself helping people in the future? With all these years of being dedicated, and a dedicated teacher as well, and then having all this experience and knowledge that you can pass on to the younger generations. How do you see yourself in the future using all these gifts and skills that you have?
Oh, that's a lovely question, because my whole life purpose, I believe, is doing exactly that, sharing the gifts and the knowledge. And you just, the passion and the enjoyment I get out of being on a podcast, anything like this, whereas I can share this information, is just gold to me. It's just absolute, just beautiful. But in the future, at the moment, I've got online courses, I've got a book out, I have got the podcast out. I've got quite a few things out there. I do workshops as well. So in the future, I can see myself still doing that, but I would love to do it on a grander scale and be able to help more. But one of the areas I'd love to be teaching more is with my book. Now, I wrote my book, it was all downloaded. It's called Intuitive Flowers, and it's a tool, just like the cards, just like other areas. It's a tool to help you trust your intuition. And that's what I'd love to. But I want to teach others to do flower readings so that they trust their gut, so they trust their intuition. And if that's what they want to that's what the tool they want to use. That's what I want to teach them.
That sounds great, Susan. So for those of our listeners who resonate with you and want to learn from you maybe or find your book, where can they do that? And your
Um,
courses and all the things that you're offering right now.
Yeah, that's all on the website. It's called intuitivenature.com.au. So it's an Australian business. So you've got to have the AU in it. The podcast is The Art of Intuition, or The Voice of Intuition. I'm just changing it. I'm still not sure which way I'm going yet, but The Art of Intuition is the workshops where people actually intuitively draw their flowers, and then we do a reading on it so they get an understanding, because flowers are your goals in life. So if that's your goal, what is your intuition telling you about how you get there?
Thank you, Susan. That's great. And any messages for our listeners?
Oh, look, I really would just like to say, start doing something. Test the theories like I do. Test the theories. If everyone's talking about meditation and if you've heard it a few different times, that really is your intuition kicking in. Test it. Just give it a couple of weeks and 10 minutes a day, but test to see what it's like. I know after I had done my meditating for probably about, I think it was probably about 2 months, I just couldn't get enough of it. I went from half an hour to an hour and a half because I was enjoying that peace so much. So just test the theory. That's all I'm asking you to do. Test the theory, see what resonates with you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much for sharing all this. Thank you for tuning in. Your feedback is always much appreciated. Let me know your thoughts. Message me on Instagram at BEnergyAware or leave a comment. You can also get in touch through my website, BEnergyAware.com. Leaving a review on Apple Podcasts is always much appreciated, as well as sharing this podcast with your friends. And as usual, there is help available. If you're seeking to empower your life by using your intuition and making decisions from a place of trust, then get my audiobook, Get Empowered, or get in touch with me through my website to book a session. Take good care, and I'll talk to you next time.